started. So thank you all for coming for our briefing on the 112th Annual Council of the Diocese of Atlanta. So it was my first time going, and I usually enjoy things like that. I like to go to convention, councils, that sort of thing where business is engaged. Everybody doesn't like that, but I like to see the way the church works in the broader context and bringing people together from all congregations, lay and clergy, not only just to do the business, but also to worship, fellowship, get to know other people. In this diocese, there's a service project that was new to me that occurred. So we'll just chime in as we might, but wanted to share, this is information that was distributed at our tables, that we are a community of 50,000 plus Episcopalians striving to love like Jesus with 114 worshiping communities in 75 and a half counties in Georgia and 11 active convocations. We are growing, 760 baptized, 475 confirmed, and 240 plus received. Dedicated, average Sunday attendance across the diocese, 15,000 per Sunday. So imagine that we're part of 15,000 people who are in an Episcopal church today. 1,500 youth formations, 8,000 adults in spiritual formation, and 4,344 children enrolled in Sunday school. There's 191,240 diocesan emails read, so there's engagement. 30,000 diocesan video views and 97,988 diocesan website sessions. So this is reminding us that we are not Congregationalists, that we are part of a broader community of the Episcopal Church located in North Georgia.
I have a question about that.
Yes.
So I talked about we're growing.
Mm-hmm.
So the overall number is growing? Because the trend is...
Well, because of baptisms, confirmations, and those received.
But it doesn't talk about the people we're losing. Right?
Well, no, I just picked it. This was on the
right.
I'm not responsible.
Just wonder if the church is trending in the same direction as all churches and we're losing.
Well, it depends. There's a document that is produced by folks that deal with demographics in the Episcopal Church. It has a breakdown by province and also by diocese. It's interesting, and I didn't pull that out, but I will because I like to look at things like that. But you're right. Overall, within mainline denominations, there is a reported slow decline, which is a change that's occurring, a paradigm shift, which if you read Phyllis Tickle's book, The Emerging Church, we are not to be alarmed by this because it happens about every 500 years throughout Christianity. There are these changes that take place. So Christianity is not going to be dead and dissolved or anything like that. But you're right. So when there is a decline, that simply means that the harvest is more plentiful and the laborers are still few, as Jesus pointed out. So that means that we have greater opportunities to spread the gospel. So I'm just going to pick up on a couple of things that interested me and let you all kind of, because I was new, and you all, some of you have been before. Maybe Cindy, if you go next as a newbie. What was new to me about the way this particular gathering works is that you could sign up and encourage to sign up ahead of time for these committee assignments. And I didn't know what it was, so I didn't sign up. I said, I'll just go and be an interloper somewhere. So what it is really organized like General Convention or like the government. So the committee assignments actually look at resolutions, or if there's no resolution in that area, they have a nice conversation. So the areas are community ministries, congregational vitality, constitution and canons, finance, General Convention, and youth. So we all spread ourselves out into each of these committees. So I'll invite everyone who's here, because we do have representation, to share what happened in your committee. And if Cindy, if you want to, as a newbie, share some of your thoughts now.
I went to the youth gathering, and I was really excited because They said there were 150 youth that registered for the lock-in, and normally they have 40 to 50, so they almost had 3 times the number. And they had almost as many people sign up that wanted to be chaperones as they did kids. So a lot of people wanted to be kids. The one thing that I really, really enjoyed was the service project that the youth lead, and then people sign up to do it. It's, at the end of the day on Friday night, and was putting together food packets, and it was especially fun to be there to watch the presiding bishop and the bishop dancing. And
Line dancing.
Yes, line dancing, and we had to wear the red net, hair nets and stuff. And, because we're packaging food that's going to be shipped to wherever, so we made 15,000 meals to send, and it was putting a soy protein, a vegetable mix, and rice, and then also a vitamin packet in these bags. And we get on a group, my group did, and then the guy that was doing the protein would put the protein before the bag got there, and so we had, some fun time with that. But going to the youth thing, there was no resolutions or anything to discuss, so it was basically talking about all the multiple activities that the diocese has, everywhere from, EYC to beginnings, new happening, and stuff at Camp Michael, the summer camp programs, just an array of activities to keep our youth engaged and active. And then they divided us up in groups, and people brought up topics that they were interested in. So the topic group that I went in is how to bring other youth into the program, not to invite them necessarily to church, but say your kids or grandkids have a friend that they want to invite to just come to youth activities, and eventually we might pull them into the church and even bring their family in possibly if they see that their youth is really, really interested in this kind of thing. So they were talking about, and then there was another group talking about just planning activities, to keep the kids engaged. How do you keep them from wanting to go with their friends to the mega church that has the rock band, on Sunday mornings? And then there was another group about pulling together different youth groups from different churches, because maybe you only have one youth, and this Episcopal church, the Baptist church down the street, has 2, the Methodist church has 12, and then across town, the other Episcopal church has 6, to combine, groups in the same, where we have convocations, to do things so that way, you're not trying to engage one youth person and then they leave because they don't have anything to keep them active. And so basically we just kind of, they said the main thing that they want to do is to, build a fun, safe environment for the kids, and get adult participation as well. That was another one. How do you get adults or something to be youth leaders? What do you do to bring in? So we broke up in these little groups, and my reason for going with the one of bringing other outside kids in is because we also in the vestry have this group trying to bring in young families, to bring in more people, young families to keep the thing going, especially when you start to have an aging population in your church. And then the kids had a Q&A session, and a lot of them said they would not want their parents to be the youth leader in their church for various reasons, because the youth group is a place where they can go and talk about things that bother them or issues, and they feel like they're in a safe, comfortable place where they can discuss it with someone else other than their parents. So they already have their parents on a regular basis. And one kid said what brings her to church was donuts. And I said, well, food here, just like, and so it was just a lot of, information of ways to build your parish around your youth and young adults too, because the person that leads it for the diocese, he seemed like he was too young to be in that position. He's one of those people that's like, you do what? You lead the diocese for this? And you look like you could be a high school kid. And he said, we need adult leadership, somebody that would be goofy and let be themselves. not try to be something they're not, when they come into the youth thing. So that was what I did, but as far as overall for the council, I thought there would have been a lot more business stuff, so there was a lot of talking about all the things going on around the diocese, around, human trafficking, special schools that have been set up, and some videos and some talks that people gave were like pulled the tears. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is going on, and it makes you think, oh my gosh, I need to quit work so I can help with a lot of these things too. So I thought it was very, very interesting, and it was a wonderful, wonderful sermon by the presiding bishop. And there was a bet between a clergy member and senior warden in his church, and the question was, they had a bet on how long it would be before the presiding bishop would step away from the pulpit, and he said he lost because it took him about 10 minutes before he actually walked away from the pulpit, and so he lost the bet.
Beverly?
Well, I've been to, we went to the seminary, so I've probably been to 20 now, seen a few bishops. There were about 400 people there. It was a Holy Innocent School in their gymnasium, and so people generally sit around your table with your parish, although they also encourage, some years it's been compulsory to sit with other parishes, which can also be fruitful. I met my first NRA member 2 years ago at another table, and it was a really good exchange. So the business was light, I thought, in this one, and if it hadn't, for me, it would have been a little disinteresting if it hadn't been for the presiding bishop and our bishop's energy. Bishop Rob's been away on sabbatical for about 4 months. So he was sort of low-key entering, but he gave a thoughtful address to the council, which the bishop does each year. Having the presiding bishop as a guest, his focus was very much around how to love like Jesus and how we learn to do that, and the 7 practices that we've mentioned that we did at the parish weekend. It was highlighted we had a breakfast also with everybody on the Saturday morning. So this force and power around how powerful love can be, and especially contrasting, he would say the Episcopal Church has this news, really good news, because the dominant thought about Christianity by people outside the church is that it's about judgment, about right and wrong, going to hell and so on. And I think we forget, anyway, got to remember that. We really do think the gospel is about love, inclusion, and so on. One side little thing that happened at the breakfast, at the church service, so 400 people were in the Church of Holy Innocents. Our bishop ended up leading the psalm, and he invited the women to do verse 1 and the men to do verse 2, or however it went. And I had Liz Schillinger sitting next to me, a former Christian priest, and I said, he hasn't done his LGBTQIAE plus training, sort of putting us in a dualistic binary thing. Well, just lightheartedly, but at the breakfast the next day, this seminarian from Swanee, who's really formed in Franciscan theology, and I think he's a lay Franciscan. But anyway, he raised with both bishops this whole thing around the language. Our language needs to change, and so that we aren't sort of dividing people into men and women. Some people's identity is not, gender identity is not that. And both bishops basically said, this is something we haven't learned. So these young seminarian and congregations that were gathered there were a little further ahead in some ways, and that conversation about language fitted with, so the special committee I went to was every 3 years a group of clergy and lay people were elected as delegates to go to the National Church Conference called General Convention. And I went to hear the group that had gone this year. We've just had, we're trying on one, where was it? Austin, that's right. And what I heard from the delegates was, their excitement about going. Like there were like about 9 of them, and that would be like they'd been to a revival. They just, everybody must go. They were on such a high about working so hard and being, having this experience at the National Church. Like they worked from 7 a.m. to like 11 p.m. on committees and all this. So that's one message to bring back. If you want to have a really powerful experience at the National Church, get yourself elected as a delegate. Or you can even pay for your, I've gone once and I just paid my own way and it was very exciting. The 2 reports that sort of, they were wondering around why there's a lack of interest in parishes about the issues of the Episcopal Church. Why aren't people excited about General Convention or what issues are going, or what's going on? And I had a bit of an insight around, it's the issues that people might get engaged in. And one issue, Sam Campbell is one of the delegates, and he said, well, maybe it's the issues and resolutions that go to General Convention that fail, that are the ones that people might have more energy around. And so one resolution that's failed year after year is trying to get the Episcopal Church to divest from investments in big companies that are building housing on the West Bank, which is illegal. The Israeli government building new dwellings and communities on the West Bank. And some of the big companies, one's Caterpillar, and there's a couple of other ones. Anyway, so for the National Church with its broad political base and this odd commitment that we sort of had to Israel above the Palestinian cause, I don't want to say either or, it's just a big issue. Anyway, I thought that was one thing, and then the other thing that the General Convention has decided to do is a committee's going to work on towards a new prayer book. And so you'll start hearing all that. It'll take a decade or something. But the real interest in us doing something around language and images for God and so on. Thank you.
The breakout group that I went to was on church vitality, and not many surprises there. We were asked to say, first of all, we had to go through a list of things that we created of things you would expect or like to get from your experience in your church. In other words, what fills you up, what turns you on, what gets your spirit moving, and what is it that your church offers that you think is special and different and wonderful. Nobody there in our whole diocese is well represented in this group. I'd say there were at least 60 people in the room, and so that's a lot of churches. And nobody has breakfast every Sunday, except St. Bartholomew. And you know, the round tables, the way we get to know each other, talking while we have breakfast, that's an experience that other people have little bits and pieces of things they try to wedge together and make an experience like that, whereas we have it in one fell swoop every Sunday morning, and it's in between 2 services, which matches up 8 o'clock people that hate music and 10 people that anyway, it's different. And I think, then we started that when Matt came here. And Matt had come from a parish where they had Spanish-speaking congregation and English-speaking congregation, and that's the way I think they got them together. Did they do that at breakfast?
I thought we always had breakfast.
I think we always had it.
We always had
Parishioners used to have to do it.
Oh, no.
I don't remember having that when Stacy was here. I guess we did.
Because I used to have to organize it from church.
It wasn't as much fun. Anyway, I thought that was the most compelling thing that made us different, because everybody else talked about things like the different kind of classes that you have, the adult Christian ed, centering prayer, Bible study, all kinds of things like that. It wasn't that much that you said, oh wow, I never thought of that. That didn't happen. Everything was routine and ordinary and pedestrian, and presentations of other people. And what most people said they wanted to do that they weren't doing, what they wanted to do more of, what they wanted to commit more to, was things like prayer, more, pray more, things like that. All the things were spiritual. They weren't in groups, even small groups. They were individual goals. What most people, the things people talk about the most. A few people talked about things in groups, but most of them were things that they wanted to challenge themselves personally about. Can I speak to the overall experience? I'm probably going to do this again. I love doing it. I did it a bunch of times when I was on the standing committee and was commissioner of ministry. And it's a tremendous experience. First of all, if you don't know how your church operates, this is a good way to start learning. Because it's the nuts and bolts. It's the daily routine of how we do church. And another thing you get, and one way you learn, another way you learn how to do church, you get to meet a lot of church people. You get to meet a lot of lay people, and you get to meet a lot of priests. And every now and then, a bishop. So you get to know folks, and they don't have the round tables, but everybody's moving all the time. You can't bump it into people. And it's a tremendously fulfilling experience to do that. And you find after you've gone through the experience, you just picked up little bits of nickel knowledge everywhere you went. And everybody you talked to gave you something that's valuable. And then all of a sudden this picture starts to form of what it is to be an Episcopalian in terms of polity and organization and how we do things. And that's a rich experience, and I'd recommend it to anybody that cares or has ever wondered, why are we Episcopalians and what does that mean and what do we do? And also, if somebody outside says, what are y'all really about? And you don't have a clue, this, if you say, well, we go to church every Sunday, we have really good music and we have liturgy and we have formal worship that's not willy-nilly and made up on the spot. That's good, and it differentiates you from other people, but not really the story. And from the fact that how we're organized reflects on how the country's organized, because we did both organizations. It's just something wonderful to experience, and I recommend it.
John, if you'll share your committee on finance, and when you finish, I'll address the resolutions, because the committee I went to had 2 resolutions.
Great. Well, I would underscore everything Ken said about the larger meeting, getting a view of how the diocese actually goes about its institutional work was fascinating to me. And there was voting, which Angela will talk about later. That it's very democratic, I'll put it that way. I attended the finance meeting, and at Diocesan Council every year, we are given a budget. I don't know if you spoke about the budget before I came. Sorry I was late, by the way, for this event. And it's a very important, detailed document. In any organization, especially of this size, a budget really represents the institution's values, what is important to us in financial terms. And it reflects the status quo in many respects, but it also reflects ways in which the diocese and individual parishes want to attempt to change and make things better for the future. My committee meeting was the Budget and Finance Committee, and we spoke for about an hour or so, and there were two topics that were most prominent. One was a discussion led by one of the rectors in one of our local churches, who was very concerned about some specific items in the budget. He was primarily concerned about why some of the salaries in some of the parishes are different from other salaries in the parish, in the diocese. And having gone through budget discussions in my other life for years and years, that was a familiar conversation that was very sensitive in some ways, but very appropriately addressed as a group, as a committee. I think the larger issue that person was concerned about was not just why one salary in one parish was greater than another salary in another parish, but the larger issue of transparency surrounding the budget. Why is it that so late in the process does a committee, a diocesan council, have an opportunity to discuss and question items that are in the budget? And so the conveners of the committee meeting said that is something that they would want to address in the future. Is how can groups like this and other groups within our diocese discuss priorities and specifics of the budget before it's finalized and printed in a document like this. It was all very civil and kind, but people were really talking about what was on their mind. I was very happy to be a part of that, and of the larger diocesan council.
That's interesting that someone was questioning in a committee focused on the diocesan budget, what individual parishes are paying their clergy, which has no relationship with. That was something new for me to see, that the salaries of clergy
Yes.
are published in this diocese, which I find odd, and that there was no, in Maryland, I reference, there was always a compensation and benefits committee that had a resolution that suggested cost of living increase, and also there was a range that you were expected to pay people based on years of ordination, size of congregation, things like that. How much to pay the organist, supply, preachers, and things like that. You're supplying one or two services. That information is available. But the fact that there's no guidance in terms of compensation from the diocese is curious. But there are reports out there that similar break down, like you talked about, the number of people, that breaks down compensation based on the diocese as well as the province in particular regions, so you wouldn't expect to be paid compensation to be the same, say, in Mississippi as if you were in California. So another basis in terms of cost of living. So
It was fascinating.
I'm glad I wasn't in that group. So what I did go to was community ministries, and I did, like I said, I didn't know what was going on. So it ended up, we did talk, and a couple attempts were made to amend the resolutions. The resolution that did go to the floor and pass, there were two. One was to dissolve the Commission on HIV/AIDS. So we had spirited discussion about that, and two people suggested that this is a racist action because Atlanta apparently is #1 in HIV/AIDS cases impacting African American men. And here this diocese is dissolving the commission that should be working to help decrease that. So some technical changes were made to the resolution. It went to the broader council, and we did vote to dissolve that, but someone asked the bishop to convene another exploratory committee to kind of see what we might do and not just elect. Because that to me is just, how can you have a city that's the highest in the country and then the diocese says we don't need to do this?
It wasn't being absorbed by some other body, it just was dissolved.
It was dissolved.
So what was the argument in favor? I mean, what's the reason to do it?
For dissolving.
Because there was no activity.
There's no participation.
No interest in it at all. That's why the two people brought up the racism, that when it was impacting gay white men, and there was a lot of energy around trying to do something about it, and now that particular group is getting educated, has medication, things like that, living longer, and the group highly impacted is black males, then okay, we don't need to engage this. Hence the suggestion that the bishop do something about it. So the other one had to do with prejudice-based violence in social media. It recognizing the negative reactions in terms of our relating to one another as human beings through social media, that we should not engage and avoid inflammatory language, things that are divisive, homophobic, sexist, transphobic, xenophobic, all those things that are hurtful. So we said that we want to support not being violent in the wake of social media. So that was my committee that I sat in on. And the other resolution that we had has to do with property. This is a resolution that further defines a general convention resolution in terms of requesting permission. It would be from the standing committee. The congregation is going to encumber or sell property. You have to get permission from the standing committee. General convention resolution has added a few more details, and so to make it clear at a diocesan level, in terms of getting approval for things like people have entering into contracts with groups for a longer period of time, the approval has to be gained from not the standing committee, but the canon to the ordinary or the bishop. So as I looked at our situation here, the only group that we have an agreement with that's impacted by this is Toco Hills, because it's for 5 years. So I'll need to send that in to get approval from the canon to the ordinary or the bishop. It's an agreement that was signed December of last year, so we're already in the midst of it. But I think that the impetus for this is the reality that some congregations enter into agreements with situations that turn out to be poor decisions. And it turns into a mess, and then who has to take it over? The bishop, someone in the diocesan staff. So this allows someone else beyond the congregation that can get caught up in groupthink and not be able to see outside of what the benefits are, the disadvantages. So I voted for it. I was in support of it. One of our delegates didn't support it because he thought it was too much control. But I think that control was necessary because ultimately the property of the church is owned by the diocese at the end of the day. There are churches that enter into leasing property, like lease out a rectory. I had that experience to people that live in it, then, you know, we got a lease to deal with, we got property management, and that's not part of the catechism or the baptismal covenant. I think this was a good thing to have. I was disappointed that the deputies from General Convention had no resolutions at all to bring forward for our consideration. Zero, nothing. And so I did say something to Bishop Rod afterwards, expressing my disappointment that there was nothing that happened among all of those hundreds of resolutions that were adopted by both houses for us to consider in the Diocese of Atlanta. What happens is right before the next General Convention, a report comes out to each diocese asking, how have you responded to these resolutions that are designated for diocesan or congregational engagement? So it's easy to kind of look and say, oh, well, yeah, we're doing that, we're working on it, because those are some of the options. But I would hope that next time those things would be available. Of course, you can go online and look it up and sift through, but I've been a deputy 3 times, and I always thought it was my personal responsibility to bring back to the diocese and say, hey, these are some things that passed. Maybe you might want to pick it up in your congregation. For example, the one that had to do with us not using bottled water. That's a resolution for, I think, 2009 General Convention. We wouldn't use bottled water in our congregations, recognizing that the plastic is not good for the earth. The one about the tithe as the standard is a General Convention resolution, not from the Bible. It came from the Bible. The General Convention resolution said tithe is the standard to give. But there are a number of things out there. I was really surprised because of our focus with Ashlyn Jones' Center for Racial Healing, and there were resolutions connected with that particular area that no one brought forward. So speaking of that center, there's something called, it's going to be at the cathedral on February the 16th called the Gold Summit, Racial Healing in a Changing World. It will involve the screening of Traces of the Trade, which is about the slave trade in Rhode Island. This film has been around 15, almost 20 years now. But it's a good film to watch and have discussion around, to understand that the slave trade was not simply segregated to the South, that the North also was complicit in this. And so this filmmaker, Katrina Brown, is also an Episcopalian, so it traces and has interviews with her, talking with her family members about discovering this and how they responded to it.
And we have a copy of the DVD too.
Just a couple other things that happened. There were elections. Trustee for Swanee, University of the South, people put themselves forward for that. Board of Governors, Camp Michael Conference Center, as well as Standing Committee. And they gave out the Bishop's Cross recipients from each convocation. And so just about everyone was there. But it was a way to honor someone from the convocation about some sort of ministry that they were involved with. So it was really a heart-touching aspect of convention that people to honor one priest, I think, but mostly lay people. No, 2 priests. No, 3. 2 priests and a deacon. To honor them and recognize what they were doing. So that was nice. Any questions? Yes.
I got a couple of comments. First of all, so the diocese is recommending that you don't be belligerent to people on social media. That was my take of that. So you can't. The diocese is recommending, as an example, that you don't call Trump an SOB or anything else. Correct?
Correct.
And then one thing that I love about our community is that things are brought up that I would never do by myself. And I was saying this to someone just recently that I cannot use plasticware without thinking of St. Bart's and all we went through and feeling guilty that I'm eating. and using it. And so now we're on the human justice things. Is that right? Human justice?
Human trafficking or?
No.
Social justice, okay.
Okay, so I just wondered, and I wanted to ask Ken, is there anybody any parish as active as we are? Because I'm sure that what's going to happen is the same as the recycling was years ago, is that I'm going to be enlightened and involved. And it meant when the parish and the community is talking about it all the time, there's just, I can't not be involved if you want to be involved. And I know that's what's going to happen to me, the same as recycling and social justice. I just wondered if another parish is so involved in social justice as we are.
I think so, yeah, many are, in different sorts of ways.
St. Luke's and All Saints.
When was the last general convention?
This summer.
So it was recent. I mean, it was.
I know.
Yeah. It was,
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
So
nothing
4
happened.
years, another one in 4 years.
3 years.
Three.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
two.
the next time is in Baltimore.
Oh.
Guess you're going, huh? Yeah, to visit. But we put a link on our webpage because there's a document that lists all of the actions that I haven't carved out time because I like to kind of be aware of myself, just kind of skim through. Because it kind of provides a foundation. If you have something that say, maybe I always wish I could do this, well, hey, there's other people, somebody at General Convention thought it was a good idea too. Well, then that becomes the springboard. General Convention, the Episcopal Church said we should be doing this. Anybody want to join me? So,
I just had an idea pop into my head right now. On our webpage, at the top we have some links, like Amerson House is up there, it goes right to our website. Why not put a link straight to the diocese? It'd be really easy for people to
it's
check
not there. It's at the bottom, maybe.
Oh, is it?
I don't. Yeah. I
Oh,
think
it's
so.
oh, okay.
But you're right. We can move it up.
Well, it is helpful. Yeah, okay.
Paige Love, what I thought you were going to say is maybe in the future we could have a link through our webpage to any buzzings from the national conference to inform everybody about what went on there and what the resolutions are.
Yeah, that would be great.
I'm on listserv from a diocese where I used to live, Diocese of Central New York, and I was looking at it last week, and it's interesting that diocese is buzzing about a lot of things that they're doing in relation to national
Yeah.
Yeah, that would help us feel really
connected to the wider organization.
There was some discussion about that amongst the delegates that went to the General Convention about how they were generating each day feedback to what happened at General Convention today back to the diocese, and our communication broke down. We used to have someone whose job was that 2 or 3 years ago or something, and now there was a breakdown in the communication. So they were upset about how it didn't come back, but there was also a challenge to us. There were also plenty of, like the National Episcopal News Service and other places were doing daily feedback things. So,
And they did offer to come to congregate. The deputies offered to come to congregations to give a report. They did put themselves out.
Yeah, any way that our webpage can contain all those links and make it easy. Otherwise we have to go to all these different places.
You're right.
yeah.
All those resolutions, I mean, we know what they're going up for the convention. But does the congregation, does the congregation know what the resolutions are that the deputies will see?
Yeah, yes. Well, we have known when we've had somebody in the congregation that's a delegate. Mac used to be a delegate and
Deputy.
deputy, I mean, yeah. and a few others.
Well, that information is all, were you talking about general convention?
Yes.
Yeah, well, what you all just went.
Okay, then, yeah, but there was only one resolution that they sent to us, and that was a canonical change. So I don't know about you, I was shocked to get there and find the packet, and there were other resolutions that had just disappeared. So they had a deadline, so I don't know how you get beyond the deadline, and there, so I'm learning. So
And somebody has asked me to tell our convocation chairperson, who's a priest, there's meant to be a meeting before council of delegates and anyone that wants to go to hear about the resolutions, to look at the budget. And there's been lack of interest in recent years of people in our convocation turning up the meetings and so on. Anyway, so somebody has asked me to make sure that I report back that they really would have liked to have come to a meeting. I can't remember who that was. But yes, that just seemed to be a drop, didn't it?
I'm news, like,
Yes,
that's the way
it's
things
meant to
happen.
be a
I don't know.
pre-convocation meeting.
Because that's when the people are in office.
Yeah, right.